We now move to highlights of the opening ceremony, the Zeno of Citium session, a fireside discussion with Professor Michalis Arghyrou, head of the Economics Office of the Prime Minister of Greece, in conversation with Mr. Kyriakos Iordanou, General Manager of ICPAC, our knowledge partners in this session.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. It is indeed a pleasure to be with you today, and it is my greatest pleasure to have Mr. Michalis Arghyrou as my discussant for this evening's event. Firstly, a warm thank you to the organizers, Nicola, and your amazing team for this very exquisite initiative and the momentum it takes. And Michalis, an opening remark from your side for the conference, for the forum.
Thank you very much, Kyriakos. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. I am indeed very honored and very happy to have been invited and participate in today's event. It is particularly special for me, as myself I am a Cypriot. I have been born in this city, so although I have lived most of my life in Greece and in the United Kingdom, and I now serve the Greek administration, it is always good coming back home. So this event has started with very prestigious opening statements by the President, by the Commissioners, by Mario, by Mr. Iordanou, and it promises to be, and I'm sure it will be, a very engaging and very productive event. So thank you very much once again for having me.
Yeah, well, being conscious of the time and given that we don't have the whole evening, although we would like that, Nicola, I will start our discussion by first saying that we will continue from where Mr. Nava left the discussion. Probably, Mr. Nava, you have seen our notes. With the two main elements that you've raised that will cover most of our discussion with Michalis. And the first is how the current geopolitical landscape in this volatile and very eruptive scenario that we've got around us affects business and economy, Michalis, in our area and, of course, in Europe.
Yes. When I started back in the Greek administration in 2019, departing colleagues were telling me, you are lucky you're going to have an easy ride. But it has anything been but an easy ride. And, of course, we had big crises like the pandemic, and then we had, of course, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which has created a wholly different geopolitical landscape in Europe and globally. And of course, then we have the tensions in the Middle East, and these things are ongoing, and they do affect significantly the economic landscape in Europe, in individual countries, and globally. Obviously, the conflict in Ukraine has created an energy shock, and this has increased the price of energy. And of course, the price of energy increases, then passed through to global inflation. So this has been on its own a major shock, as it has affected firms' cost conditions. The main thing that I would say is impacted by the geopolitical tensions we observe is the feeling of uncertainty and the limited visibility that international business, but also households have. So when you have geopolitical conflicts, plans are more difficult to make, investments are more difficult to plan and execute. And definitely this is something that has a negative impact on economic activity, jobs, and prosperity. And let's not forget the very substantial impact geopolitical events have had on the security front, and namely the need to increase defense spending. Of course, for some of us, defense spending had always been part of our budgets because of very specific circumstances, which particularly in this country and city we are very well aware of. But now this has gone beyond countries like Greece and Cyprus. So Europe has found out that it needs to rearm itself in order to maintain its security, its defense capabilities. So there's going to be a rebalancing of economic activity towards defense. This will have a fiscal impact because the economic investment that has to be done in the area of defense is very substantial, particularly within the current framework of increased NATO targets. So there's going to be more demands for public cars in the area of defense. So overall, you may say that there are parallels to the Cold War period. And this, of course, calls for an increase in overall economic efficiency and making up of these difficulties that the global geopolitical landscape creates, with progress in long-standing agendas and files which we can work on in order to make sure that we continue to grow, people continue to have jobs, and the living standards continue to increase, particularly within the current framework of demographic trends, which is on its own a different but very important subject.
Obviously, this unrest and conflicts not only impact business, but they also affect the diplomatic and the overall political agenda. Something that is discussed here is the possible inclusion of Cyprus into the Schengen zone. Do you see it positively, negatively, any benefits? Will that increase the level of security that you have just mentioned, given that it will form the outermost front of EU?
Well, obviously, this is something for the Cyprus authorities to decide when they apply, how they go about it. Generally speaking, Schengen has to do with the movement of freedom of persons within the European Union. And as one of the main pillars of the European project, in principle, the free movement of people is a welcome prospect. It has very significant economic benefits. And in principle, therefore, one can only be positive towards the prospect of Cyprus joining the Schengen area. Now, definitely, there are other aspects which have to be taken into consideration. The geopolitical tensions that we were discussing before do have also another important side effect, and that is the immigration issue. And that on its own needs very careful management. And therefore, this probably at this particular junction creates some extra considerations. So I can only hope that this trade-off is optimally managed, and I would personally say what I have already said, that in principle, the freedom of movement is a very welcome thing.
Thank you. And anyway, it helps towards the European integration, which all aspire. If we were to widen the lens from the Middle East and capture a snapshot of the whole of the world, we'll see that business and trade is not at its best as well, due to the imposition of tariffs with trade wars. You mentioned before Cold War, it was a two-polar world. Now it's a multipolar world if we go business and trade. So how these developments also affect our economies and the European economy as a bloc?
This is another layer of economic and political complexity which has come about over the last 5 to 6 years. Europe and Greece, and I'm sure Cyprus, stands for free rules-based trade, and that will continue to be the position no matter what. International trade based on rules is a field where Europe excels, and we do base a lot of our economic growth and our jobs creation and prosperity on free trade. So anything that restricts free trade from the European and the Greek point of view, and I'm also sure about the Cypriot point of view, is something that we are, of course, regretting. It is true that we have gone through some rough waters, especially over the last few months. It is also true that there has been a recent agreement between the United States and Europe, which has averted the worst-case scenario. And that trade agreement is, of course, welcome in the sense that it offers at least some clarity and some stability and some predictability. As an economist, I cannot say that I am enthusiastic about the fact that compared to 2024, in 2025, we do have a substantial increase of trade barriers with our bilateral economic relation with the United States. And let's not forget that the United States is the main market for European exports. Approximately 22% of European exports go to the United States. So having such a substantial increase in trade barriers is not something I am particularly enthusiastic about. Nevertheless, I think that the agreement was one that is to be welcomed because of the reasons I mentioned before. Two important things. The first is that, obviously, as Europeans, we need to look now to diversify our trade towards other markets. And there exist opportunities. You do have markets growing in other places of the world, in all continents, and that is something that we should be looking to take good advantage of in the good sense of the word. And it is important that we continue signing trade agreements with other countries. The second thing I would like to mention is that we should make sure in Europe that we facilitate internal trade within Europe. And there, the agenda of completing and deepening our single market is of the utmost importance. There is, probably we will mention this later in our discussion, a very valid and very important discussion about increasing European competitiveness. But let us suppose that we have all the competitive goods and services in the world, and we are very productive and everything. If you have trade barriers raised for other markets, where are we going to sell all these things? And the answer to me is that first and foremost, we should make sure that we are facilitating trade within the European Union. In some sense, we are each other's best insurance when it comes to this. So that is the second thing I would like to mention. And the third final remark I would like to make, and this is very relevant for Cyprus and Greece and Europe, is that although global trade of goods in recent years has stabilized, it is approximately 22-23% of global GDP. So we have come to a plateau when it comes to globalization in terms of trade of goods. The trade of services continues to increase. And most of money between borders, or rather increasingly a big portion of money crossing borders, has to do with the trade of services. So this is a huge opportunity for the Cypriot economy. It is a huge opportunity for the Greek economy. Cyprus does fantastically in that respect. In Greece, we do improve, but we have to improve further. So that is something that gives the two countries a good opportunity, but Europe as well.
Well, the services sector is our heavy industry, Michalis, in Cyprus, and has been for the last 30, 40 years. I think it was a very wise focus of the then governments to look at how we can be a better player for international services. Yet, we've got some things that need to be amended. And some other things come and are reformed by the European Union's directives, which we can touch upon a bit later. But let's stay on the European competitiveness. I think it's a big question around whether Europe is competitive, whether Europe is producing at favorable prices. It has a competitive edge, both in production price and demographics as well. Or has lagged behind. And we see players coming up like China, India, Middle East, BRICS, the US reclaiming what they've lost. And Yeah, I think that there's something that needs to be done. It was nice hearing before from Mr. Nava that it's on the agenda. And we've got the Draghi report, which I think hasn't yet been started to be implemented.
The short answer is yes, we should. We are in Greece very strong proponents of the Draghi report because we think that it is providing a very clear and very concrete blueprint for Europe, A, to ensure that it continues to provide its citizens the standard of living they aspire to and they deserve. And second, that we are a union, we are a continent that can stand on its own and can be taken seriously when it comes not just to economics agendas, but also geopolitical agendas. First of all, let me say that Europe is a place that represents the dream destination for many people in the world. So we don't do everything wrong. We do a lot of things right. Otherwise, not everybody or not a lot of people would like to come to Europe. So the European project is a project that has delivered very important results. Let's not forget why the European Union was created. It was created to safeguard peace in Europe. And it has done so over the past 7 or 8 decades. On its own, that is a fantastic achievement. And of course, it has created long-lasting prosperity. But as you said rightly, we don't live anymore in the 70s or even the 80s. Now we have a much more globalized world.
And we are not in silo. We are
exactly
in the center of all globalized activity.
Exactly. So we cannot take what we have achieved so far for granted. So yes, it is true that we have fallen behind in certain key technologies, such as, for example, the technology of digitalization. We have lost our competitive edge in some respects, and now we have to reclaim that. So some key things, this is a huge agenda, of course. Mario Draghi spent quite a lot of time in writing his report, so I will not make justice by going through everything, but I would say in bullet points, we are perhaps a little bit too bureaucratic in Europe. We need to become a place where business can be made easier. Of course, the fact that you have 27 union member states doesn't help, but we can probably agree on a 28th regime, which would be a common denominator, and that would be basically a force for everybody to converge to more business-friendly regulation. In the area of finance, if you need to have progress in technologies that are cutting edge, people must take certain risks. The banking system typically will finance more proven projects. So we need capital markets, because it is the capital markets where the money for more risky projects are invested. We need, therefore, to proceed with the Capital Markets Union. But in order to have the Capital Markets Union, we must also have the Banking Union. And the Banking Union remains incomplete. It was basically pushed forward in the previous decade, but as from 2015, no substantial progress has been made. So we need to take this progress. Also, we need to invest more to our people. Myself, I am an academic economist and always have great interest about education. Let's be honest with each other here. The education outcomes in most European member states, not all of them, there are countries that have done very well, like Poland. Poland is a very good exception, or Finland. Education outcomes are not particularly good, especially if you compare them with educational outcomes in places like Southeast Asia. So we need to invest in our people more, and we need to make sure that our young kids get the skills which they will need in the modern labor market. So there is a whole range of things. Energy is a hugely important thing. That is a very good example. I mean, now, and rightly so, all of us are trying to increase our electricity generation from renewables so that, A, we have more competitive prices, and B, we have less dependence on countries like Russia. But at the same time, we do this in a way which is national-centered. So Greece is very much in favor of the idea that we should have a single European energy market and we should finance energy projects in a way which is centralized so as to avoid unnecessary extra investments. So, yes, the answer to your question is that we need to be relooking again our drive for competitiveness, but it is not doom and gloom only, or it is not doom and gloom at all. Europe is an economic giant. It has leverage, and if we use this leverage, then we will be able to have significant progress.
So this obviously leads to how we can make better of the single market, which I, of course, personally am in favor of it, which also calls for a lot of integration in a lot of areas. So single market, if it were to be enhanced, probably it would cover a lot of the things that you've mentioned, Michalis. You also mentioned before something about the services and the business and services. We see a number of initiatives, regulations coming from Brussels that are trying to regulate intra-EU business in tax, in FDI, and in other areas, data protection, etc. So I would tend to agree with you that we should ease business intra-EU and work a bit more collectively outside EU, capitalizing on the comparative advantage of each member state in order to build competitive advantage for EU. How do you react to that?
Yes, I think that when we speak about comparative advantage, implicitly what we have in mind is market forces allocating capital and talent to different locations according to economic efficiency. And myself, I am very much in favor of this idea. At the same time, an important objective of the European Union is, and rightly so, a cohesion among European member states. So, yes, it is, if you like, a puzzle where different pieces have to be placed together in order to get a good outcome. One is the regulatory component, where, as I have already commented, we need to become a little bit lighter. Without, of course, compromising safety standards, without, of course, compromising human rights, without, of course, compromising any of the core European values, we can do with more simplification and less bureaucracy, which is a very standard European agenda nowadays. The second thing which I think we should do is that we should make this link, I have already alluded it, but I will make it again. We should see our competitiveness enhancement policy with our cohesion policy in tandem. And let me, if you like, make it a little bit more specific. It is very good that we now look, and this is part of the next European budget, to finance projects at the European level. So basically, there is in the Commission's proposal for the new European budget the idea that we should be financing centrally firms which can become global champions. And that is absolutely right. But at the same time, the cohesion objective should also be served. This agenda should not be executed in a way so that investment and economic activity takes place in small geographical pockets. And let's not forget, the starting position of EU member states is not the same. So when I say that we should also maintain focus on cohesion, I don't mean that net contributors, countries like Germany or countries like France or Sweden, should write checks for member states who are net recipients basically to boost consumption. What I have in mind is that we should invest across the whole of the European Union so that every European Union member state has a competitive economic activity in perhaps different industries that will be decided by the markets, so that we create in every part of the European Union self-sustained economic progress, which will then create the internal demand that will make sure that the increased supply due to higher competitiveness will be absorbed. So I see this as complements, not substitutes. And a last word about foreign direct investment, where, by the way, in Greece now we are doing much better than we used to do in the past. Foreign direct investment is absolutely necessary in order to cover investment needs and at the same time transfer new technologies. It has all these good aspects. But we should not be naive. In an ideal world, we would be friends with everybody, and basically we would have a perfect Ricardian economic world where we invest freely and each produces the goods that they are best at, etc. But as you said, Kyriakos, these are a little bit more challenging times, and we should not be naive. We are, of course, very friendly to foreign direct investment, but this foreign direct investment should not create strategic dependencies, which later on we may regret, both in the areas of economics and security of supply, but also in the area of defense. We should be very careful as to these geopolitical dependencies.
Michalis, you are very true about the last one. Indeed, the foreign direct investment screening regulation comes to regulate or provide a filter for European Union against the threats that you've just mentioned, and the Cyprus presidency will have to deal with the FDI exports. So it's something that we would need to see it both ways. Saying this, Michalia, I think it's fair to mention that Cyprus is about to pass the law of foreign direct investment. It's on Monday, the last discussion in the Finance Committee at the Parliament, and hopefully in a few days' time it's going to be passed the law eventually. And also we are currently under a tax reform project, which, well, it raised some criticism as to its effectiveness with respect to competitiveness and meeting these challenges. I have noticed that the Greek government at death, the Prime Minister made some announcements in order to alleviate a bit the burden. And also I would like to comment that I've seen some European countries being a bit flexible and adjusting to the interesting times that we have in order to deal with either inflation or the tariffs by taking extra measures to remove unnecessary, possibly, burdens from the businesses and the people tax-wise. So a comment for what the Greek government is doing as the Prime Minister declared.
Yes, in Greece we have some very specific challenges, and the announcements about tax policy last month in the Thessaloniki International Fair are part of a more general strategy in order to do three things. First of all, increase labor market participation. We have made progress. Actually, we have made very big progress when it comes to reducing unemployment in Greece over the last 6 years. From 18%, we are down to 8%. But we also want to increase the number of people who are willing to get jobs. That's what I mean when I say labor market participation. So that's the first objective. The second objective is that we want to increase investment in Greece, because during the years of the crisis, investment in Greece collapsed. And as a result, our capital stock went down. And now we try to bring it back. And the third thing we want to do is that we want to make labor and capital more productive, and therefore we aim for higher productivity. What we have done in the tax system in Greece, as announced by the Prime Minister last month in Thessaloniki, is that we have reduced basically income taxes, more or less for everybody, with extra benefits for young people and for families with children. So everybody will see their tax bill reduced, But young people, until the age of 25, they will pay zero tax up to a certain level of 20,000 euros. And people between 26 and 30 will pay just 9%. Now, why we have done this thing? Because this is what we believe to be a supply-side tax reform. We did not want to incentivize consumption by reducing VAT or indirect taxes. By the way, that would not be effective in terms of boosting purchasing power, because the economic literature and the international experience shows that when you reduce VAT or other indirect taxes, the benefit doesn't pass through to the consumer, at least not wholly. So we wanted, on the one hand, to boost purchasing power by means of letting people keep more of the money that they earn, and that benefit will pass 100% to them. But by reducing taxes, we send a signal that being economically active pays off. So we try to encourage people who do not work now to look for a job, because that will be worth it. We try to incentivize young people to get in the job market earlier so that they earn money, and by the time they reach 30, they will have accumulated skills which will then make them more productive later on. And we have also reduced taxes for people who are basically belong to what we call the middle class. So the upper parts of the middle and the upper parts of the income distribution, because we believe that a lot of these people are highly skilled, highly productive, so we want them to stay in the country. We want them to work more because they will earn more and they will produce products of higher value added, and we want the so-called brain drain generation to come back. So this is, if you like, a very internally consistent, as I would say in economics, strategy, which looks to achieve the objectives I mentioned, and together with our drive to reduce bureaucracy, together with our drive to improve education in Greece. By the way, a Cypriot university is one of the universities that is going to start operating in Greece as from this year. We are trying basically to address this holistically, and I believe that it will have a good effect.
Thank you very much, Michalis. I think it was a very good message for all of us who are here in Cyprus, what you mentioned last. I would say that it boosts social cohesion on the one hand, and also it increases productivity. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for bearing with us, and looking forward to talk to you outside. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Arghyrou and Mr. Iordanou, for your insightful contributions.